Another part to our pre-installation is that we want to make sure that these line fitting is in absolutely good condition for retightening and the threads are not cross-threaded. Before we can reinstall these line fitting and its line for sealability, we want to make sure we use a wire brush and clean the threads of the fitting. The complete fitting itself you want to clean. Then you also want to move the line back, and down in this area you want to just slide this back and wash in here, because you're going to see in here has developed a rust already. You just want to wash this down. Then we're going to wipe it with a rag, making sure we clean it out. Once it's dry, we're simply going to take some grease and apply it to the tube. Now we could bring the fitting back down and play with it so we could slush the grease all around inside of the fitting. Failure to do this is what's going to happen later on, is the line is going to become frozen to the fitting, and when you turn the fitting, it's going to turn the line and snap the line. So placing this grease on the inside is an ability to prevent that from happening. So this one we have to do the same thing. You have to always make sure that the fitting would spin itself on the line like I'm doing here. If it's not able to do this, then you have some problem. You're going to have to use the penetrating oil and let the fitting sit for a couple days. Then you're going to have to go back with it. Then you're going to have to go back to it with a tool to try to release it. So once we could establish a nice, clean and prepare fitted line, we want to make sure the inlet is completely clean, no grease is blocking on the inside. Now our line fitting is ready and prepared for installation. Well, I had the hydraulic steering box sitting in a vertical position for over 24 hours to check on the seal for the Pitman arm. Now it's time we want to install this hydraulic gearbox. And the first thing we want to do is want to make sure all the lines is out of our way. We just want to rest the box onto the frame rail. Then I'm going to use my hook bar alignment tool, and I just want to align the first bolt hole that's going to be placed through the Pitman arm and the frame rail. So this is going to give us some stability until we are ready to install our shackle bolts. So this is our 4 bolts that was removed, and we want to pay careful inspection to the bolt before we install them. We also want to make sure we clean the bolt and pass a wire brush through the threads, clearing them out for installation. But when we look at the physical bolt itself, you can see on the top, that will be up here. You can see how we start to get some corrosion. Well, the solution for that, when you're going to be reinstalling this bolt, is we want to take some grease and just lightly coat the shaft of the bolt. This is where it's going to be installed, and the frame rail. Then we also want to put some grease onto the threads, because this is going to help us get a true torque when we're ready to torque the bolt to its factory specification. Now we just want to tilt this forward, making our installation of the bolt. Then we could remove our alignment tool. So we must not forget that we had these 4 bolts at the top to align, and you're going to be able to tilt this arm this whole assembly forward and get your tool on here for torquing. So this nut will be torqued to approximately 25 foot-pounds. On the reverse side of the 4 bolts, we want to make sure we install our locking washer and the nut. Then we're going to torque the bolts. During the process of tightening the nut and bolts, you're going to have to hold this wrench onto the nut, and you're going to use this little edge right here for bracing all the nut with the wrench when you're tightening on the outside. In the event the wrench should become restrictive to remove, you will simply pull back on the nut and then you'll be able to remove the wrench. Because what will sometimes happen is when you tighten on the bolt on the outside, this wrench is going to brace itself against the frame and it's going to be hard to remove. So you have to pull the wrench back, tightening the nut a little more, and then you will be able to remove your tool. Let's take a look back on the outside. Once you're finished snug tightening all the bolts with the ratchet with your 19mm socket, we're then going to use our torque wrench, and we want to set this torque wrench to 70 foot-pounds. Then we're going to place our socket on the end and begin to torque the nut in a crisscross dimension. We must also make sure that we are holding the nut and bracing it to the frame with this 19mm wrench. We will make our first torque installation on the bolt at 50 foot-pounds. Once we can establish that clicking sound from the torque wrench, that means we have met our specification. We will now remove the wrench from this bolt and place it onto the top cross-dimensional bolt. Let's final torque our last bolt to 50 foot-pounds. We will now adjust our tool again to its maximum recommended torque, which is 70 foot-pounds. And we will go through the same procedure. This time we're going to start with the bolt that we complete our 50 foot-pounds torque on. We will now return to the cross-dimensional bolt on the opposite side for 70 foot-pounds of torque. Let's move to the top bolt. Now we will finish with the bolt that we begin with. Now will be the best time to replace the rock guard with its 5 10mm screw. The next thing we want to move on to is installing our line fitting. And if you notice what I've done here, I've placed some plastic inside the hole where the line fitting should be installed. This is to prevent any dirt or sand or stone that could block the port. So the first thing we want to do here is we want to make sure we could seat our line with no stress. We just want to seat the line into the hole. Then we're going to catch our threads by hand. So we just want to turn the threads all the way down until it looks something like this, until you have most of them caught. Then I'm going to bring the other one up, place it in position. This must be fit by hand. You have to twist it with your finger first. Do not use the tool for installing these line fitting first, because chances are you could end up stripping threads or installing the fitting crooked. Alright, we're first going to start to tighten the low pressure line, and this is the 17mm that we want to use. So if I could give you an approximate on the torque for this, I will have to say about 20 foot-pounds, and that should seal the fitting. Also, when you tighten this nut, the line should not move in the fitting. So if you try to move the line back and forth, it should be restricted. Time for us to do the 14. And remember, we had a little problem with this 14 line wrench when we were on tightening it. So we want to run it down as much as we can with our finger. If possible, you can use a 9/8 and try to get it snug. Then we're going to use our 14 line wrench. We want to make sure we have it in position so it does not brace on the back, preventing us from turning. So we must make sure that this is seated. Because on the back of this line wrench, the casting is what's preventing the wrench from seating all its way down in certain positions. So you have to find that position, which is approximately right here. And then you're just going to pull on it. This you have to be careful with. There's a modification that could be made by taking off a piece of the casting from behind on this housing. But we have to remove this housing first to see what we're doing in order to remove any excess metal so we can get clearance for this wrench. But what we have established is the line is tight. Both line is tight to specification. You also should remember that this small high pressure line is capable of approximately 1000 psi of hydraulic fluid. So you do not want this to break on you or the pressure fluid to hit you, because it could cause injury. That is why you want to make sure that our line is absolutely tight. Alright, the next stop is we want to anchor this ABS communication line. This is for the ABS sensor, and we want to tighten these 10mm nut to support the bracket. Next stop is we want to install the shaft, and we want to take the direction of the bolt and the direction the shaft is pointing in, because remember, we want the bolt to cross in this hatch right here. That will give us a perfect alignment. Alright, let's install the steering shaft. So you can see this is where the bolt's going to be, and that's where it's going to cross. So I just want to bring this so we could fight with this until we bring it all the way down. Then we're going to be able to pass our bolt through. Alright, so this shaft here, you're going to have to be very careful with it. When you're installing it, you have to make sure that the notch on the spline shaft is right in line with the bolt that's going to go across in this universal joint. Alright, so we've basically got our parts aligned. See the tool that I'm using? That's because the Guyanese stole my ballpoint hammer and left this behind for me to use. Be careful with Guyanese people. Don't have them around you when you're working. Don't teach them. Don't show them your secrets. They're going to rob from you. They're going to steal from you. And they're basically going to leave you like the Guyanese, handicapped and disabled, without your belonging tools. Alright, now you're going to want to release the steering lock so we can have this bolt to be tight. And this is a 12 millimeter. This bolt will be torqued to approximately 8 to 10 foot-pounds. We will now return to the top where the steering wheel connects to the shaft. And what we want to do here, I just want to place some grease on our bolt, making sure I reinstall it. This will be the best time for retightening the steering wheel shaft bolt. And this bolt will also be torqued to 10 to 8 foot-pounds. Now it's time for us to install the Pitman arm to the steering gearbox on the center link. So there is only one way for replacing this Pitman arm. You really can't offset it by a 5 or 10 degree to really change the alignment of the steering system. This Pitman arm can only be fitted in 90 degree position. So that will be 1, this will be 2, and this is the position that we want to achieve. It's always common practice to mark the Pitman arm inverses to the shaft and the housing, the casing. So this way when you're assembling this Pitman arm back together onto the shaft, you could reference these marks. But in this case, you don't need to do that because the Pitman arm only fits 4 positions on the shaft, and that will be all 90 degree position. So we're now replacing our locking washer and the 1 5/8" nut. The next thing we want to do is we want to replace our castle nut for the center link ball joint, and this is going to vary in size. It's going to be different size, depends on what manufacturer ball joint or center link you're using, but this one is a 17. So the key here in tightening this ball joint castle nut is you want to turn it until it's unable to turn anymore. Then you're going to have to align one of the windows in the castle nut with the hole on the stud. So once you finally have a firm tightness on the nut, you'll take your cotter pin and you just feel for that hole. If you cannot find it, then you're going to have to back off on the castle nut. So you have to remember when you pass this cotter pin through, you're going to have a short end and a long end. You want the long end to be on the bottom because you're going to need to fold it over like this. And this one, the short one, you can push it up. That is the only way and the correct way, the best way for installing a cotter pin. Do not do it any other way. Make sure the long end is folded to the bottom, a hook the stud, and the short end is pushed up, preferably if it can be pushed more, you will do so. This nut for the Pitman arm shaft must be torqued to anywhere between 175 foot-pound to 200 foot-pounds of torque we'll need for torquing this nut. Now that we're finished with the installation, part 1 in our series, I did not get to show you how we use this tool for removing the Pitman arm, but this tool, this is called a Pitman arm puller. This is what you will place over the Pitman arm, and you will apply force by this driven stud on the bottom for pulling the arm off once this nut has been removed. We are now at the final stage of our installation, and what we want to do is reconnect our battery cable then we're going to fill the power steering hydraulic fluid reservoir with fluid all the way to the top. We must allow the system some time for the oil to drain into the plumbing. We will need remaining power steering fluid to continuously add to the reservoir once we start the engine, because all this fluid is now going to get filled into the cavity of the power steering gearbox, the power steering pump, and its plumbing system. So once you start the engine, you will want to run the engine for approximately 30 seconds, then shut the engine off, come back and check this power steering reserve for oil. In all total, you're going to need approximately 3 of these bottles for completing a hydraulic power steering assemble and installation.